Okay, so I don't know what to call this shiur. This shiur, I guess for now, the title will be Scattered Thoughts about Judaism's view of eclipses. Okay. This really is a Friday morning shiur, but because I'm going to be driving to the location where I'll be for the eclipse on Friday, then I am not as prepared as I usually am for a Friday morning shiur. So you're getting me at like the Thursday night stage of preparation. Um, the area that I would like to cover is I just want to have like a view of how Judaism regards the eclipse. Okay, the topic that we're not going to take up, which is an interesting one, which I know has been asked by a lot of people, is why there's no bracha on the eclipse. Okay, um, there's different theories. You know, no one holds that you make a bracha on the eclipse. Um, I think the most plausible theory for why there's no bracha on the eclipse is, and I don't know this for sure, I'm waiting for confirmation, so if anyone hears, let me know, is that I don't know if Chazal, or sorry, I shouldn't say Chazal, if Ezra and the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, when they were setting up the brachos, if they had a enough knowledge to know how regular eclipses were, and therefore they didn't make establish a bracha on it. It's also possible that because it's not a phenomenon that is visible, like technically speaking, you're not actually seeing the eclipse. You're seeing like the effects of the eclipse, and they're not, unless you're in the path of totality, it's not like dramatic, you know. So it might not be enough of a substantial phenomenon for there to be a bracha on. So I don't know why they didn't make a bracha on it. If they did make a bracha, then Ose Mase Bereshis would probably be the one. But what we're gonna, yeah, Fega.
So I know there's a bracha called Birkas Hachama. Is I
Right,
don't really know what that's for, but it's
yeah,
like if they had that, then I don't know.
right. So Birkas Hachama is a bracha that's made once every 28 years on the Machzor Hagadol, which I don't exactly know what that is, some cycle of the sun, which apparently they did know. And so it's not a matter of frequency, but regularity is the word that I'm using here. Is like I don't know if they knew, at that time, how regular they could predict a total eclipse, so it might not have seemed like a regular thing. We'll see evidence for the fact that they might not have thought that. Okay, so what I want to start off with, and again, this is a little bit scattered. There is going to be an agenda though. So what I want to start off with is a trivia question. Okay, well, actually, two trivia questions. First question is, does anyone know, I guess, the source that it is a mitzvah to learn about the eclipse? And I'm using the word mitzvah broadly, not so broadly under like it's part of Avas Hashem, but like there's a specific statement of Chazal about like where they identify it using the language of mitzvah. Anyone know? Yeah, Vega.
It's vaguely familiar. Isn't there a thing
Yeah,
about how if somebody has the ability to look at the stars in the sky
yeah.
and doesn't, then it's like they're over something. I don't remember
Yep, that's
what it
exactly
was.
it. You're thinking of the right statement. Yes. Okay. So this is a statement in the Gemara Shabbos, Daf Ayin He Amud Aleph. So it says, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Mishum Bar Kapara. Kol hayodea lachashev b'tkuvus umazalos ve'eno choshev alav hakazuv omer ve'es pol Hashem lo yabitu umase yadav lo ra'u. Anyone who knows how to calculate the, I don't know how you want to translate Tekuvas Mazalis, the astronomical phenomena and constellations, and does not calculate them. Regarding him, the pasuk says in Yeshayahu 5:12, the the work of Hashem they did not look at, and his handiwork they did not see. Okay. And then the Gemara goes on, Amar Rabbi Shmuel ben Bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Minayin shem mitzvah al hadam lachashev b'tekuvos mazalos. How do we know, from where do we know that there is a mitzvah upon a person to calculate? Let me just see how the Steinsaltz translates the to calculate astronomical seasons and constellations. Okay, fine. How do you know that it's a mitzvah? So it says, Shenemar, as it says in Devarim 4:6, Ushmartem va'asisem kihi chochmaschem ubinaschem le'ene ha'amim. That you shall guard them and you shall do them, for they are your wisdom and your understanding in the eyes of the nations. And then the Gemara says, Ezo chachma ubina shehi le'ene ha'amim. What chachma and bina is there which is in the eyes of all the nations? So it's not talking about Torah, because the other nations aren't going to be able to appreciate our Torah wisdom. So the Gemara says, Hevi Omer ze chishuv tekuvas mazalos. This is the calculation of astronomical cycles and constellations. Okay, so Rashi says leini ha'amim shechachma hanikeres because it's a discernible chachma. Okay, it's like a recognizable chachma. Shemare lahem siman ledvarav. They can bring a sign for their words or a proof. Bihilu chachama v'hamazalos, based on the motion of the sun and the constellations. Shemi'idin kadvarv, that they can testify about a person's words. Omer, the person will say, Shanazo geshuma. So this year is going to be rainy. Vihi kain, and it'll be such. Shanazo shchuna. This year will be, I forgot what the shchuna is. And vihi kain. Shekol ha'itim lefi mahala chachama b'mazaloseha umalodoseha b'mazol talui hakol lefi hasha hamascheles l'shemesh b'knisas chachama l'mazal. So in other words, everything's determined by these calculations. Okay, so that's Rashi's interpretation, which is that it's in the eyes of the nations. I mean, he's not explaining the first part, but he's saying it's in the eyes of the nations because people can the stars vouch for you. They can tell that you're being a chacham, and it's like evident that it's gonna, it's very predictable and it can be determined here. And you got to remember also, in the ancient world, astronomy was not considered part of the branch of the natural sciences. It was considered part of the branch of mathematics because it had to do with, with like shapes and like almost the geometry of the sky. It was numbers in the sky. So yeah, so that's what Rashi says. Okay, the Meiri gives a almost poetic interpretation here. He says, where's the Meiri? Oh wait, did I skip him? Hold on. Yeah, the Meiri says, mitzvah ahal adam lihis boded badarche mahalchos hakochavim. It's a mitzvah for a person to, lihis boded is always difficult to translate, to seclude himself, okay? But it means like, it has the implication of like, isolating yourself from other pursuits and like dedicating yourself solely to this. So to seclude himself in the study of the darchei mahalchos hakochavim, of the paths and the motions of the stars and the planets, and to calculate these things, because this is a wondrous chachma, biadia osos hashamayim, to know the signs of the heavens, velakus hamaoros, and eclipses. Okay, that's the phrase. Eclipses literally means the striking of the luminaries. Eclipses of the heavenly bodies of the sun and the moon. Below shum shkia, to know these things without any error. Valzen amar, and regarding this it says, you should do them, guard them and do them because it is your wisdom and your understanding in the eyes of the nations. So he seems to be saying it's not because you can prove it and the nations will say like, this guy was right. It's that objectively speaking, it is a chachma that is wondrous to be able to not make errors and have this, the precision of the knowledge, So he might be saying the same thing as Rashi, but like the emphasis here seems to be on the wondrousness of the chachma, as opposed to the like, oh, this guy can predict if it's going to be a good year, And then the third interpretation I found that I really like is the Ri Milunil. I just want to see if I know who this is. The Ri from Lunil. Nope, I don't know who this is. So he says, Hayodea l'chashev. So anyone who knows how to calculate and doesn't, he says, Lapishihi chachma mufu'ara. It is a wondrous chachma. Umakir gedulas kono shetiknam kirtsono. That you can recognize from here the greatness of the Creator who established the celestial phenomena according to His will. They don't have the ability to change what is decreed upon them. And they don't have the ability to help you or to harm you. Ella kirtzon habore, except in accordance with the will of the Creator. Shadan bedin briosav kechefzo. God is the one who judges His creations according to His desire. V'yakir taos hamishtachvim l'shemesh v'le'areach. And if you study these stars, you will recognize the error of the people who bow down to the sun and the moon. Shetoim, that they err, v'omrim, and they say shemirimu metivin, that they harm and they help. And you will know how to respond to an apikoros and to a magosh, which is a magi, what do you call it, an idolatrous priest. Okay, so he's putting the emphasis on what we would call avas Hashem and rejection of avodah zarah. Okay, so you got three reasons why this is going to be, why it's a sin to not be involved in this chachma, and it is a mitzvah to be involved in it and something that'll be admired by the nations. It's that it is something that will get their admiration because of how precise you can predict things. It itself is wondrous chachma, and then it can also help you to recognize and appreciate God's chachma and refute avodah zarah. Okay, so that's like a little intro there. Any questions on this before we go on? Oh, actually, I have one more source. Hold on. Yeah, Lauren.
What does it have to do? Well, I guess I'm confused about like the other nations. Like, is it to prove God's existence to the other nations, or
So it's a good question. He doesn't. He says it's to refute an apikoros, and he connects that with the avodah zarah. So I don't know if he's saying. I don't think they held that you can prove God's existence from the from astronomy. Now, though, according to the Physics to God podcast slash project, then there are astronomical observations that can contribute to your proof of God. But I don't think they had that back then, unless I'm mistaken. I want to show you one more source. I forgot. If you look at that pasuk in Yeshayahu, there's a great radak on this. So the full pasuk says, so it's interesting. He's criticizing the Jews for their involvement in drinking and partying instead of knowledge. So he says, "Hoi mashkimi baboker shechar yirdofu." Let me get the drop here. Hoi mashkimi baboker shechar yirdofu. Woe unto those who get up early in the morning and pursue liquor. And after nightfall, then wine inflames them. And there's all these instruments playing at their wine parties. And they don't look at the work of Hashem and his handiwork they don't see. Therefore, gala amimi bli da'as. Therefore, my people have been exiled because of lack of knowledge. Ukavodo mesei ra'av. V'hamono tziche tzama, and its glory will be I don't know how to translate this. Its glory will be those who die in the out of famine. Hold on just a second here. Where are we here? Therefore, my people have gone into captivity for want of knowledge. Their honorable men are famished, and their multitudes are parched with thirst. Yeah, okay, so that's going to be the punishment there. So you got this beautiful radak, which is in the same spirit as the other sources we just read. He says, "Hoy mashkine baboker lishtos yain." Woe unto those who get up in the morning to drink wine. Oy lahem shekol iskam hu lishtos ulatanu kabasar. So woe unto them that all of their involvement is just to drink and to enjoy meat. The enam oskim divrei Torah v'chachma. They don't involve themselves in matters of chachma, Torah and chachma. But boker yishkimu lishtos kilu yirdofu hashechar ana yimtzu oso tov. They get up in the morning early to drink, meaning to say that they chase after drink, saying like, where can I find the best drinks? And when they go home, they just like get kindled on wine. Okay. All right. So then he says, because he describes their party, etc. All right. They don't look at the work of Hashem and his handiwork they don't see. They are free from their work. When they are free from their work, because they're rich. All they do is party and listen to music. They don't involve themselves in their free time in words of Torah or in the words of Chachamim, which is the work of Hashem. It's written on the tablets, the Ten Commandments. Okay, so his first interpretation is that the work of Hashem is Torah and Chachma. But then he says, maybe you can say that the work of Hashem and the work of his hands is Chachmas HaKochavim, is specifically astronomy. Because from it a person will arrive at the glory of his creator. As it says in Mizmor 8. Okay, and if you want a paragraph to tell him to think about for the eclipse, look at Mizmor 8, which is, let me just read it actually. We did this 3 years ago. I'll just read it because it's very short. For the conductor on the Gita is a psalm by David. Hashem, our master, how majestic is your name throughout all the earth. You who places your glory on the heavens. Out of the mouths of babes and sucklings, you founded strength on account of your enemies to silence foe and avenger. When I behold your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have set in place, I think, what is frail man that you should remember him, and the son of man that you should be mindful of him? Yet you have made him slightly less than the angels and crowned him with glory and majesty. You give him dominion over your handiwork. You place everything under his feet, sheep and cattle, all of them, even the beasts of the field, the birds of the sky and the fish of the sea. For man even traverses the lanes of the sea. Hashem, our master, how majestic is your name throughout all the earth. Okay, so Radak quotes those things. And he says also, "V'hashmaim b'saprim kavod kel," the heavens declare the glory of God. Ratzal kol ha'omed al sod briasam, anyone who arrives at the secret of their creation. Secret here means like the esoteric high level ideas and knowledge. Yeda kavod hakel, they will know the glory of God. Amar hanavi su'u marom einechem v'ra'u mi bara ele. Yeshayahu says, lift your eyes to the heavens and see who created all these things. Rotzlomer, she is bonanu b'chachma zos umimenu yadu kavod habore. You should contemplate this chachma, and from it you will know the glory of God. And then he quotes the Chazal. Okay, so this is a very, very, again, poetic but wonderful thing. Which, look, I mean, we're in New York, most of us here can't even see the stars. Okay, but like, in out of town, in certain places, it is much more common to just be able to see the stars when you go outside, and just like even think about them for a second, and even that would be a level. But like, kal v'chomer to like study them in some way. Okay, now. If there aren't any other questions, I want to segue to a new topic, and then we'll get to the main topic. Okay, you might have already seen this because I showed it by mistake. Who among all of our Rishonim fulfilled this mitzvah the most? Okay, and the bonus also is another question that has the same answer, is who do we know observed the most eclipses out of all the Rishonim? Anyone know? Yeah, Vega?
I have two guesses, either the Royal Bug or the Ibn Ezra.
Okay, those are the two best guesses. Happens to be it is the Ralbag. Okay, so I talked about this on my Judaism Demystified Ralbag episode, and I forgot how many of these I quoted from, but these are from books on the Ralbag. Okay, Ralbag is lived from 1288 to 1344. So I just want to read some excerpts from various people who wrote about the Ralbag. So Menachem Kellner in Torah and the Observatory says, his reputation in the wider world was such that a very large number of his scientific and philosophical works were translated into Latin, and his astronomical tables were sought after by Johannes Kepler. Okay, Kepler meaning like of the laws of planetary motion, Kepler. Okay. Kellner also says Gersonides was a working scientist, okay, meaning Rambam loved science, Ibn Ezra loved science, but Ralbag was a professional scientist. That was what he did, okay? Freudenthal says Levi McGershom is almost unique among medieval astronomers for his effort to base a new system of astronomy on his own observations rather than that of those of the ancients. So to my knowledge, most people who were into astronomy relied on like other people's observations, but Ralbag did his own observations. We're going to see that in a second. Okay, Kellner says Freudenthal, that last guy, opines that Gersonides spent more time on his astronomical observations than all of his other pursuits combined. Okay, so talk about like Miri secluding yourself to do this. Okay, and then he also says, this is a last statement here. A Renaissance man from Kellner, a Renaissance man before the Renaissance, a scientist before the scientific revolution, strikingly independent in his thinking. Gersonides seems to have led many lives simultaneously. He wrote commentaries on the Bible, Talmud, and Averroes, seeing them as facets of the same project. He devoted hundreds and perhaps thousands of long nights to astronomical observations. He wrote independent and in some cases remarkably original treatises in logic, mathematics, and music. He was an active astrologer. All of this without the benefit of tenure or research grants. Okay, and he invented a type of telescopic observational tool called Jacob's staff, which was used by by other scientists and navigators. He has a moon crater named after him, Rabbi Levi. Okay, so does Ibn Ezra. So in my you're catching me on a Thursday night, okay, not on a Friday. So I'm still in the preparation stage. I was trying to trace down. I wanted to like find his actual writings on the eclipses, okay? And I have a contact in the Stern Library, okay, a listener of my and follower of my content, Alex, who talked to colleagues who got shipped in special this obscure academic work called Medieval Observations of Solar and Lunar Eclipses. And I just want to read you something here, okay? And the reason why I'm reading this is I want to demonstrate, we just read the Gemaras about how important it is to study astronomy. I want to give you a sense of what Ralbag did, okay? And it's going to seem like I'm just like gushing over the Ralbag, which I am, but like I want you to see like how seriously he took this, okay? So this book, this treatise, which is 57 pages, okay, starts off with this statement. Medieval astronomers do not seem to have made many observations of planetary positions or of eclipses to judge by available literature. There was a brief flurry of observational activity under the Caliph al-Ma'mun in the 9th century, which led to new parameters for solar motion and for the obliquity of the ecliptic. I don't even know what this is, and sporadic subsequent observations by Muslim astronomers, okay, et cetera, et cetera. But he goes on and he says basically that this was a very rare thing to actually gather your own data. Okay, so that's section 1. Okay, and he says that there were some observations of reports, etc. Then he begins to talk about Rabag. Okay, Levi Megershon lived in Orange in southern France and wrote extensively on astronomy in Hebrew. A translation of part of his astronomical work into Latin appears in 1342, and another translation of the entire text was made in the 14th century. He was critical of Ptolemy and argued that astronomical theories and tables should be based on new observations instead of relying on those reported by Ptolemy. Levi then reports his own observations and constructs theories and tables based on them. Moreover, he revised his theories when later observations led him to conclude that such revision was appropriate. Okay, so then he goes on and he lists, he says, we have, oh, hold on a second. Yeah, so he's, okay, so this is the eclipse we know he observed. In each case, hold on a second. I'm just going to read this. I've discussed his lunar theory and the role of observations in its formation elsewhere. Here I present 2 chapters from his astronomy, which include all the eclipses that he reports. Orange, his place of observation, has geographical latitude, blah, 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 but Levi takes its latitude to be blah, blah, blah. In each case, a theory is compared with observation, and after the solar eclipse of 1337, he proposed an alteration in his solar theory, which led him to reinvestigate the agreement of theory with observation. Okay, so he says how he changed this. He says, here we have an example of a medieval astronomer who had a very elaborate scientific method. He carefully criticized the works of his predecessors, constructed new observational instruments, and made improvements on old ones, considered a range of possible planetary models, introduced new models for lunar and planetary motion. Hold on a second. I am sharing the screen, right? Okay, yeah, good. Constructed new observational instruments and made improvements on own, considered a range of possible planetary models, introduced new models for lunar and planetary motion, determined the parameters for his models from his own observations, compared the predicted positions from his own model with his own observations, as well as with positions derived from Ptolemy's model, and revised his parameters in light of subsequent observations. Now look at this table here. Okay, here are solar eclipse observations that he made. Okay, so he's got here the date, June 26, 1321 is the first one. The last one is December 11th, 1339. He has the times, the magnitude, the weather. And then we have here what follows, just a ton of the Ralbag's works. Sorry, he says, by the way, Levy's discussions of eclipse data are the most extensive I have found, and his fundamental investigations of the underlying solar and lunar models are unique for the period. Okay, then he goes on to criticize him. Okay, but Ralbag goes on to talk about these eclipses, and he said, reading from the Ralbag here, he says the observation of solar eclipses on which we have depended for the above findings are 3 in number. Some took place before noon, some afternoon, and pages of data, and he says, just to read here, the 5th eclipse took place in the year 1335. The end of the eclipse was 1/24 before sunrise of October 3rd, as determined with our accurate instruments. This was the first night to the festival of Sukkot, and there was present with us a noble Christian who wrote down all that we observed. The moon remained in darkness as 0 totality, 44H as most accurately determined. We intend to learn from those eclipses as much as possible for what we seek. Therefore, we shall examine each of them to see if they agree with what follows from the computations according to our model. And he just goes on with all of these calculations. So that is really a model of what it means to be Mechashiv, Tekufos, and Mazalos. Okay, and it's just amazing that Ralbag, not just in Judaism, but in the medieval world of astronomers, is known for being someone who was a real scientist, and things changed based on him, and he shook free from the authority of Ptolemy. Okay, so that's my Ralbag coolness factor. Okay, any questions on this before we get to the main course? Okay, so the main course, and again, I want to present to you what how I arrived at thinking about this. Okay, so I read this article online, I think it was on Atlas Obscura maybe, or IFL Science, called In Mesopotamia, Being King for a Day Could Be Deadly by Rebecca Boyle, published on March 13th, 2024. Okay, and I'm going to read the article because it's going to be important for contrast. Okay, So the subheading is total solar eclipses were an omen of death for the rulers of the Assyrian Empire. The fix: install a fake king and kill him. Okay, the eclipse is coming. Preparations are underway, and everyone is buzzing with anticipation. You are getting anxious. It is early June, the year later known as 763 BC. You are a prisoner of war in Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire, and you have a good reason to be afraid. The Assyrians worship the sun god, the moon god, and other sky deities. So a total eclipse of the sun, even though you are not quite sure what exactly will happen during such an event, holds tremendous spiritual and political significance. The empire's sky priests were skilled diviners of nature, studying the motions of the moon, the planets, and the stars from their template academies to read omens from the gods. They knew a total eclipse would be very bad news. If it was forecast to fall over Assyria, like the one in June 763 BC, the eclipse would foretell the death of the king. Now, sidebar, again, I'm still researching this. I believe in Amos chapter 8, I think I saw, I haven't even looked this up yet. I think I just saw, hold on. I think it's 8, 8, and 9. Let's just see if that's right. And if not, then it's wrong. Amos 8, 8. Oh, here we go. 8, 9. Okay, so it says, V'haya bayomahu nu'um Adonai Elohim ve'vesi hashemesh b'tzarayim v'hachashakiti la'aretz biyom or. It will happen on that day, says Hashem Elohim, that I will cause the sun to go down at noon, and I will darken the earth in clear day. Okay. V'hafachti chagechem le'evel v'chol shirechem l'kina v'halesi al kol masnaim sak al kol rosh korcha v'samtiha ke'evel yachid v'achrisa kiyomar. Okay, I don't know the context here, but this is an eclipse. And I believe that this eclipse that's being talked about in this article is the eclipse that Amos was talking about. Okay, that occurred over the Assyrian Empire. I believe that was the time and the place that he was prophesying. I saw that somewhere. Okay, so then let's go on. And this is why you are afraid. You've heard rumors and you don't want to be chosen as the king's substitute. And you have good reason to be afraid. Across cultural groups and political dynasties on every continent, eclipses of the sun and moon have long been profound spiritual and cultural events. The banishment of the sun behind the moon in particular has represented many things, from a demonic dragon devouring the sun in both Inca and Chinese lore to the death of the sun in the Navajo Diné cosmology. In northern Mesopotamia by the 10th century BC, at the height of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, the priests knew that if the planet Jupiter was visible as the eclipse passed overhead, the king was doomed. The empire's scholars could predict eclipses, and priests used that information to enact safeguards that could mitigate the bad omen or at least transfer its curse to someone else. The most important such ritual was called Sar Puhi in Akkadian, the substitute king ritual. It is one of the most elaborate yet lesser-known human sacrifices of antiquity. If priests divined an ill omen in forthcoming eclipse, the real king would go into hiding, while a substitute was placed in his stead for anywhere from a few days to 3 months. The substitute king would enjoy all the trappings of regency before being ritualistically killed to fulfill the prophecy. He would be wined and dined, presented with gifts, and according to some accounts, even provided with a virginal queen as his consort. Meanwhile, the real king would continue conducting palace business somewhere elsewhere safely out of sight. On the appropriate day, decided by royal diviners and astrologers, the doppelganger was sacrificed. Sometimes the person was given a poisonous drink, sometimes he met his end by more violent means, but only after the substitute king was killed could the real king resume his duties publicly. Okay, and then they go on to talk about that. Yeah, so I read this, okay, and I thought to myself, Judaism is different, okay? I thought to myself, how, at this time when the priests of the Assyrian Empire had enough mathematical and astronomical knowledge to predict eclipses, so did we, but we did not, have any of these superstitious things and these feelings of fear that like gripped everyone. Okay. And I was looking for like any sources that address this, and I happened to find a commentary of Chazal. Okay. And what makes this special is I'm going to be going to spend the eclipse with the world expert of Chazal who wrote this translation. Okay. But he says like this. So this is in Bereshis 1:14, where it says, God said, let there be luminaries in the expanse of the sky. Lahavdil ben ha'oyom u'ben halayla, to separate between the day and the night. V'hayu le'osos u'le'moadim u'le'yamim v'shanim. They will be for signs, for appointed times, moadim, for days and for years. V'hayu li'ma'oros birki hashemayim. They will be for lights in the expanse of the sky to give light on the earth. Okay, and so it was. Okay, now we know what moadim are. Okay, appointed times. We know what days and we know what years are, and we know what lights are. Question is, what about these signs? Okay, so Chazal says like this. I'm going to read it in the Hebrew and then the English. Hamaoros yu siba laosos hashmayim. So the luminaries are going to be the causes of the signs of the heaven. Ketam, as it says in Yirmiyahu 10:2, umi osos hashamayim al techatu. Do not be dismayed at the signs of the heavens. The tam osos simanim. The meaning of os here is signs, simanim. Okay, like we say, siman is a sign. Umas olam karum kain. The Gentile nations call them signs because they believe them to be signs of what's going to happen in the future. As Yirmiyahu says, the nations are dismayed at them. Okay, now he raises a question. It should have said that the purpose of the heavenly bodies is to be for days and years and moadim. And then he should mention signs, which are only occasional. In other words, the primary function, day to day, is to keep track of the day to day, and only like on rare occasion are there these signs that the nations were afraid of. Okay. Ella, however, Shiratza lahachel bagadol. He wanted to start with the greatest thing. The signs are the major subject of this half of the pasuk. The Holy One, blessed is He, wanted to let Israel know that even the constellations, like the days and the years, are all arranged according to His will, as are the rest of the laws of nature. Just like the day and the night, the cold and the heat, the planting season and the harvest season. Just as these things have no special God, and they don't tell the future, so too the heavenly sign. So in other words, he's saying that really in terms of the actual purpose of the or the usage of the sun, moon, and the stars, really the measuring of the days is the primary one, but God wants to lead with a polemical point against Avodah Zarah to show you that the other nations are going to be afraid of these things, but you guys should know that these signs, quote unquote, are no different than any of the other laws of nature. Okay, that they're not omens of evil; they are natural things, just like God says. And then he says, just the fact that belief in fortune-telling properties of the constellations and solar and lunar eclipses was widespread among the nations. While Moshe and then later Yirmiyahu rejected this error, and declared that they were things of nature like days and years. This is a good proof that the Torah is a divine origin. In other words, if you look at any ancient text, from this time period, you're going to see them treating the sun and the moon and the stars and eclipses as like omens. But you see that the Torah was against those things. So it shows you that the Torah was not just like a product of its times. It was from God, who was trying to get rid of their superstitious beliefs. Okay, and then he has another question. He says, one must not wonder, however, why God did not wish to reveal to His people other mistaken beliefs to which they were accustomed. Okay, in other words, why didn't God refute all these false beliefs? His answer is, other mistakes posed no harm to the principles of faith or to ethical life, unlike the belief in heavenly signs, which was just as harmful as divination and similar practices forbidden by the Torah. Such activity fills one's mind with folly and removes one's faith in God. So in other words, God, the goal of Torah was not to give us a science book, but was to guide us away from mistakes in terms of our philosophy and our beliefs, and this is a fundamental one. Yeah, Lauren?
So why does the pasuk say it should be? I guess if you go back to the pasuk, does it say the signs will be for you, or the sun will be a sign, like you'll use it as a hayula osos?
Yeah.
I guess if it's meant to show that these are just laws of nature, why even mention that they'll be
right? So I was wondering that myself, and it sounds like the way that Shadal is reading it is that these things will be signs, not in the supernatural way, but signs in the same way that the other heavenly phenomena are signs, meaning like in the same way that you look at the moon and you see that it's getting to a certain stage of its cycle and you know that it's going to affect the tides, or you see the sun getting to a certain place in the horizon and you know that it means that spring is coming. It'll be those kinds of signs, not the supernatural signs.
Okay, that makes sense.
That
Thanks.
seems to be the way you're saying it. Yeah. Okay, now one pasuk. Okay, before we drop the bomb, that pasuk you quoted in Yirmiyahu, "Be not dismayed at the signs of heaven." If you look there in Yirmiyahu, the pasuk Komar Hashem el derech hagoyim al tilmadu umeosos hashemaim al techatu ki chatu hagoyim mehema. In the ways of the nations do not learn, and the signs of the heaven do not fear, like the goyim fear them. Rashi says, what is this talking about? V'az meosos hashemaim al techatu mechama luka umimeros lukin. Don't fear the signs like a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse. Okay, or so a solar eclipse or eclipses of these other bodies. Okay. Yeah, okay, fine. So Rashi identifies that specifically. Okay. So I was all set to write this article about how look at how the goyim look at the eclipses, and look at how we look at the eclipses. We look at it as the Rabag with all the Chachma and Bina, and they look at it as superstition, okay? But then a problem came up. Anyone know what the problem is? I don't know if you've encountered this already in what you've read about eclipses. Big problem. Anyone know what I'm referring to? If not, then you're in for a treat. Okay, Gemara in Sukkah, the Gemara about eclipses, says, Tan Rabbanan, Bisman Shechama Loka, Siman Ra L'chol Ha'olam. Sages taught in a brisa, when the sun is eclipsed, it is a bad sign for the whole world. Okay, I'm just going to read this in English because we got a bunch of brises we're going to read through. It is a bad sign for the whole world. To what may this be compared? To a king of flesh and blood who prepared a feast for his servants and placed a lantern before them to provide light during their feast. He subsequently became angry at them and said to his servant, take the lantern before them and sit them in darkness. Okay, so when you see an eclipse, it's like God taking away the lantern from our feast. Okay, next brisa. It was taught in a brisa. Rabbi Meir says, for the entire time that the luminaries are eclipsed, it is a bad sign for the Jewish people, for they are experienced in their beatings. Okay, we'll see what that means later. This may be compared to a teacher who comes to the school with a strap in his hand, meaning to beat the kids. Who worries? The one who is accustomed to be beaten each and every day is the one who worries. So too, when God strikes the sun, it is a bad sign for everyone, but it's especially a bad sign for the Jews because we're used to being beaten. Okay, next brisa. Sages taught in brisa. When the sun is eclipsed, it is a bad sign for the non-Jewish nations. And when the moon is eclipsed, it's a bad time for the Jewish people due to the fact that the Jewish people calculate their calendar primarily based on the moon, and the non-Jewish nations calculate based on the sun. When the sun is eclipsed in the east, it is a bad time for the residents of the east. When it is eclipsed in the west, it is a bad time for the residents of the west. When it is eclipsed in the middle of the sky, it is a bad time for the entire world. Next, if during an eclipse the surface of the sun is red like blood, it is a sign that sword, i.e. war, is coming to the world. If the sun is black like sackcloth, okay, made of dark goat hair, it is a sign that arrows of hunger are coming to the world because hunger darkens people's faces. When it is similar both to this, the blood, and to that, the sackcloth, it is a sign that both sword and arrows of hunger are coming to the world. If it was eclipsed upon its entry, meaning soon after its rising, it is a sign that calamity is tarrying to come. If the sun is eclipsed upon its departure at the end of the day, it is a sign that calamity is hastening to come. And some say when the matters are reversed. An eclipse early in the morning is a sign that calamity is hastening, while an eclipse in the late afternoon is a sign that calamity is tarrying. Okay, next, the sages said, there is no nation that is afflicted whose God is not afflicted with it, as it is stated, and against all the gods of Egypt I will mete out punishment, I am Hashem. That's referring to the fact that the plagues of Egypt were systematically designed to like refute the Egyptian gods, right? Like they believed that the Nile was a god, boom, blood, the sun was a god, boom, darkness. The Gemara adds, okay, now this is an important point for taking all of these. When the Jewish people perform God's will, they need not fear any of these signs. As it is stated, thus says the Lord, learn not the ways of the nations and be not dismayed at the signs of the heavens, for the nations are dismayed at them. That's the pasuk in Yirmiyahu we read. The nations will be dismayed, but the Jewish people, but the Jewish people will not be dismayed, provided they do not follow the ways of the nations. Okay, now if you thought it was bad now, it's going to get worse, okay? And this is one of the Gemaras that you should not quote in certain company, okay? The sages taught that on account of 4 matters that the sun is eclipsed: on account of a president of the court who dies and is not eulogized appropriately, on account of a betrothed young woman who screamed at the city that she was being raped, that there was no one to rescue her, on account of homosexual relations, and on account of 2 brothers with blood spilled as one. Okay, so if anyone claims that the Talmud says that the eclipse is because of the gays, okay, they're not wrong. The Talmud does say that. Okay, now obviously we have to explain this, okay, but that's it is a statement in the Talmud. All right, so this is why non-Jews should not learn the Talmud. And then the last one is on account of 4 matters the heavenly lights are eclipsed: on account of forgers of fraudulent document that is intended to discredit others, on account of testifiers of false testimony, on account of raisers of small domesticated animals in Eretz Yisrael in a settled area. Okay, that's because like if you have a cattle range, you're gonna have pasture land for your cattle to graze on. But if you have like small individual animals, as like a goat, it's just gonna go and eat your neighbor's garden, and it's like a form of theft. And on account of choppers of good fruit producing trees. There's a funny Rashi on this, by the way. I forgot to incorporate this. Let me just read you the Rashi so you can get a haha. And you may have seen Rashis like this in Chumash, but this is a Rashi here. Sorry, it's not as haha as I'm making it out to be, but it is funny. So on those four things, Rashi says, lo shamati tam b'davar. I have no idea why. So I didn't hear any explanation for what these four things have to do with each other. Okay, so one of these places where Rashi is, I don't know, but he said I didn't hear. Okay, so what are the questions and problems you have on this Gemara macro perspective? Obviously, there's a lot of micro questions you can ask. I can identify, I think, two questions. Arguably, they're just two sides of the same question. But what are the problems here with all the Gemaras we just read? Yeah, Ayala.
What does it mean, or in what way is an eclipse a bad sign?
Okay, so you can ask this as a question, which is, in what way is an eclipse a bad sign? Okay, that's fine. That's a fair question. Yeah, Tamar?
I guess also just a factual question in this way. Also, what is a sign exactly?
Okay, yeah, I will add that here. What is meant by sign anyway? Okay, Devorah?
I mean, I guess adding on to these questions of trying to understand the sign, like, is this saying it's like a causative thing, or like like an
Okay,
eclipse
right.
comes and you should think about these things that maybe you're doing, but like
Okay.
there's no like causal relationship.
Okay, is it causative? Is it indicative? Associative? Symbolic? Something else? Okay, yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, Lauren?
What's their source? I guess that it's
Okay, that's a good question. Yeah. How did they know this? Okay,
Yeah.
what's their source? Yeah. Okay, especially if Rashi didn't give them a source on this. Yeah, Tamar?
If they knew that this was an astronomical phenomenon that just happened at a certain time, then how could they interpret it as anything other than that?
Okay, so that is a big question. Okay, which is here's how I'm going to phrase it. Okay, we know that these are just natural, predictable phenomena. Okay, if they knew that, how could they say that these are signs? Okay, like for example, there's a cool website which you can go to, by the way. If you want to know where and when the eclipse is, go to NASA's site, Where and When. Okay. And so for example, I plan to be in Rochester, and you go to Rochester and it'll tell you what time and the duration of totality and what percentage. So it's 2:07 is when it starts. Totality is at 3:20 until 3:23. Okay. And then my brother and my mom are going to Dallas, which it's at 1:23 to and then it's at 2:40. Okay. So ours are going to be eclipses towards the end of the day, right? But let's say you go to, I don't know exactly where this is going to be. Let's say you go, can you see it in New Zealand? Oh, whoops, hold on. Okay, let's say you go to this island. I don't know where these islands are here, but it would be in the morning. So you're telling me that if you're there and it's an early eclipse, then that means that like calamities are going to be waiting to come. But if you're like later on, then it's going to be like earlier to come, or like east and west. Like, doesn't it depend on where you are, so like, but the main problem is that these are natural things. I can say that they're signs. Okay, Devorah?
I hope that this is macro enough, but there's a lot of things being said in each chunk of Gemara. Like, are they all supposed to work together to give one idea?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question also. So, how, if at all, do all these little eclipsey tidbits, new word, like, I guess, how, if at all, are these little eclipse tidbits to be understood, together, right? Are these different opinions? Do they share causes? Yeah. Lauren?
Just on question 3, I'm kind of like, couldn't you say the same thing about like the rainbow, which is also a natural phenomenon, but the Torah does
Right.
make explicit
Okay.
that it's a sign. So I guess it's kind of like that's what I'm thinking about. So I mean, I still agree with the question, but
Okay. Yeah.
that's
I
why I
think,
kind of was wondering if there's a source, because with
yeah.
the
So I think,
rainbow, yeah.
right. I think you and Devora are both pointing your way towards a good answer. Okay. The other macro problem I had in mind, this was one of them, is that these are natural phenomena. The other one, which again, arguably is the same side, or a different side of the same coin, is this sounds really, really, really superstitious. Okay. And we have all these statements about, like, first of all, we have an Isser D'Oraisa of Nichush, of it's usher to make decisions based on omens. Okay. We also have an Isser of Me'onain, of astrology. It's usher to make decisions based on astrology. And like, yeah, it's machlokas between the Rambam and and the Rambam camp and like the other camps about whether astrology is real, but everyone holds it's usher to like act on it. And then you also have these teachings from the Torah, like the Abravanel on that pasuk in Yirmiyahu that says, "Don't be afraid of these signs like the goyim are." He says, "Hine ze be'emes ta'us hu biadchem." This is a mistake in your hands. Ki me'osos hashemayim Lakius hamaoros umachbaros hakochavim. So he says, from the signs of the heavens, such as solar, such as eclipses and conjunctions of the planets. In roy shetechatu v'tivchadu atem. It's not proper for you to be afraid of them. Even though the nations are afraid of them. Okay, why not? That Hashem says that all of these heavenly bodies, actually, I want to read this inside 420. Let's go here. Actually, I want to open a new thing so I don't forget to close this. 420. Yeah. So it says in 419, that's what I wanted. Pentisa inecha hashamayma, lest you raise your eyes to the heavens, v'ra'isa, and you see as hashemesh v'sayreach, the sun and the moon, but as hakochavim, and the stars or planets, kol tzva hashamayim, all the heavenly hosts, v'nidachta, and you will be led astray, v'hishtach v'isalahem, and you will bow down to them, v'avadatam, and you will serve them. Asher chalach Hashem lekacha osam l'kol ha'amim, that Hashem your God literally smoothed out l'chol ha'amim, for all the peoples, tachas kol hashemayim, under all the heavens. The eschem, but you, lakach Hashem took you, va'yotzi eschem yikur ha'barzal mitzrayim, took you out of the iron crucible from Egypt, lios lo la'am nachalak yomazeh, for you to be people as an inheritance for him, like today. So what does that mean? So the Brahmanel says, l'chein roi it is proper for the non-Jews to be afraid of the heavenly signs, because the heavenly bodies rule over them. But you guys, lo techetu, you should not be afraid. Yan heyoschem yuchadim lahashgacha helokis. You're under God's special hashgacha. Ve'enechem tachas hamaracha hashamayim. So you're not under the heavenly dominion. Okay, or like Chazal say, ein mazal Yisrael. So in other words, even if you hold that the signs of the heavens are real, then you are not affected by that because you're under God's hashgacha, because you're part of the Jewish people, So this whole thing sounds superstitious, and that seems problematic. And again, that I'm not saying that it's a question because I found it, but like that ruins my whole Devar Torah, right? I wanted to say the whole thing about how like all these other nations are superstitious, and I had the whole Shadal set up, and now we have this Gemara that says that these things are all omens of signs, So the question is like, what do we do with this? Okay, now I don't want to answer the Gemara yet. I want to just start methodologically speaking. Okay, what are you supposed to do with this Gemara? How do you approach it? or what premises, I guess, do we need to clarify here? Yeah, Devorah?
Well, we generally, I mean, there are different schools of thought over here, but generally, I prefer it when we assume that it is not like they're not saying like this is a causative thing. It is just natural, predictable phenomena, but we're going to use eclipses to trigger some kind of tshuva,
Okay.
thought-provoking.
Let me stop you right there because I think you're on a good track, but I'm asking a more basic methodological question, which is when you see any statement in the Gemara that seems to be saying something that we know scientifically is not true, so then like what should your assumptions be? Or what in the drop-down menu of how do I approach this? Like what are the options there? Yeah, Lauren?
I don't know. I'm just thinking like it's not literal or there's a deeper idea, but I just
Okay, so
don't know it yet.
one possibility, and that's like the approach that Devorah is taking, is that that there is some idea that is being taught here. Yeah, Tamar?
Depending on the situation, it's possible that they were working with the best science available to them, and then
Okay, another possibility is that they were working with the best science available to them. Okay, anyone else have another possibility? Okay, so this approach is spearheaded by the Rambam and especially by Avram ben Rambam, who I did not have time to include here. I just wanted to read it. To me, the clearest statement of this is in the Rambam's letter to the sages of Marseille on astrology and constellations. So he's addressing people who did believe in astrology. So he says like this. I'm going to read this in Hebrew because I like it. V'datenu alam ikara hi. So what we've said from the beginning, our opinion from the beginning is shekol divrei hachodim b'kochavim shekerhim eto kol balei mada. The entire position of the stargazers is regarded as falsehood by all men of science. Okay, so he starts off by saying, scientifically, astrology is bunk, and that was in the Rambam's day. So kal v'chomer in our day, I don't think there's any scientists who hold by astrology. V'ani yodea, I know efshar Shetachapsu v'timsu divrei yechidim mechachmei ha'emes Rabbeinu aleihem hashalom v'Talmud of Mishnah of Midrashas, that you might search and find some sayings of individual sages in the Talmud and Midrashim, and the Talmud, Mishnah, and Midrashim. Shedivrehim marim shebe'es toldos shel adam garmu hakochavim kafakach, that at the moment of a man's birth, the stars will cause such and such to happen to him. Okay, or you'll find statements like the one we just found about omens. Al yikshe ze beinechem. Don't let this be difficult to you. She'ein derech shenaniach halacha l'maisa v'nehadar a pirkei avos. It's not the proper derech, it's not proper methodology for a person to reject the psak halacha and then go back to all of the original arguments that led to it being established. Okay. V'chein, likewise, ein roy l'adam lahaniach dvarim shel das shekvar nisamsu harayos behen. So too, it's not proper for a person to abandon matters of reason that have already been verified with proofs, v'yinar kapap mehem, and to shake his hands free of them, v'yitla b'divrei yachid min hachachamim aleim shalom, and then to base himself on the words of one of the sages. Okay, now he says three possibilities for what happens. Efshar shenis alim mimenu davar be'osa sha'a. It's possible that something was hidden from him at that time. Okay, this English is not my translation, by the way. Sage was possibly ignorant of the matter. Okay. Oh, shinafarish sheish ba'osam devarim remez. Okay, or there may be an allusion, okay, to a hidden idea in these words. Okay, that's number two. And then the third one, O amram lefi sha umase shahaya, or they said them based on the time. Oops, that's not all of this. They said them based on the time and the circumstances before him. Okay, so I'm a little uncertain about how exactly to divide these three things, but I'll tell you how I'm reading it. Okay, and you tell me if you read it some other way. So the Rambam is saying when you find something in Chazal that goes against science, there's three possibilities. Possibility one is that they were mistaken. Okay, and I would include in that, I would either say it's possible that that particular sage was mistaken, or that Chazal as a whole in that era were mistaken because they were relying on the science of the times. Okay. Number two possibility is that they never meant it to be taken as a scientific statement at all. They're really alluding to some other idea, okay, some idea in ethics, philosophy, et cetera, et cetera. That's like the approach that Devorah wants to take, okay, which we will, spoiler alert, end up taking, okay. The third possibility, Amen Lafi Shah Umasaj Hahaya, they've been said based on the time and circumstances before him. So I think you could read that to say that he was relying on the science of the times, but then what does the first part mean? So I take this to mean that he was making a statement that was calculated based on the circumstances that were there. And if you understood the circumstances, you would understand why he's making that statement. Okay, you wouldn't see it as anything, you wouldn't see it in the other two categories. And I'll give you an example that's made up and an example that's real. An example that's made up is, let's say I quote from a rabbi who said that demons can't hurt you if you don't talk to them. Sorry, if you don't fear them. You don't fear them, okay? So what are the possibilities? We know that demons don't exist. So one possibility is that rabbi believes in demons, and he literally thinks that demons won't hurt you if you don't believe in them, okay? Possibility number two is he's not even talking about demons. He never believed in demons. He's speaking allegorically, that like, demons, the Meiri has the thing that Kriya Shema on the at bedtime protects you from demons. The demons are your harmful false thoughts. Okay. So that's number two. Third possibility is, what if I told you that the context in which this rabbi said this was he was talking to his 5-year-old kid who was going to bed and was afraid that there was a demon in his door. And he said to his kid, the demons won't hurt you if you don't believe in them. So that's not category one, because he's not actually believing in demons. And it's not category two, because he's not alluding to an analogy, to an allegory. He's saying a statement that had a particular context. And if you understood the context, you would realize that it's not meant to be taken at face value. Okay. The real world example of this is, and I don't know where this Gemara is, the Rashba quotes it, that there was one of the Tanaim, I believe, said the statement that there was a woman in Egypt who gave birth to 600,000 offspring. Okay. And if you just took that statement in isolation, then you would think that it's a metaphor or a miracle. But the Gemara itself gives the context. It says that this rabbi was speaking in front of, like in a shul setting, and people were nodding off and going to sleep. So he shocked them, and he said, there was a woman in Egypt who gave birth to 600,000 offspring. And they all went, huh, huh? And then he said, who was this? This was Yocheved, who gave birth to Moshe, who was equal to all of Klal Yisrael, which is 600,000 people strong. Okay, so yeah, he was talking about a metaphor, but the point is that, like, if you saw that he was just trying to shock people, then you would not take this to mean, you wouldn't take it as an illusion, nor would you take it as being intended literally. Or you have other statements that we read when we did the shiur on Onkelos resurrecting Jesus through necromancy, that Avram ben Rama says that sometimes Chazal would record their dreams, and it was not because these things actually happened, and it also wasn't because they were alluding to secret ideas. It was that they were doing dream analysis or something like that. Okay, so that's how I understand this. Yeah, Ayala?
I understood a little differently by context. I don't know if it's like possible that he's saying this, but that like based off of what was going on like historically at the time, then
Right.
when they said that like this eclipse is because it was a bad sign, is because all the Jews were sinning, and like at that time,
Okay, right.
whatever.
That's a great example. That's a great example. And I think that's actually what I was going to say for this, but I didn't connect it to this. Yeah. In other words, they had a particular rhetorical purpose in mind for that audience that they were speaking to, right. Kind of like, for example, I guess the most recent example of this is October 7th, there were lots of people who said various messages to their congregations. Some of them said stuff that they thought based on this is why God is doing this to us, but others said it because they just wanted to like capitalize on the move towards unity of the Jewish people, and and said it for that reason. Okay, and then the Rambam concludes, Halo tiru shahare kama psukim min haTorah enan kipshutan. We see that many psukim in the Torah are not meant to be taken at face value. Ulefi shenoda barayel shadash efshar she'yeh davar kipshuto. Since once it's known through proofs of reason that the matter is not to be taken simply, Tirgumu HaMetargim inyan shadas sovelas, then the Targum translates it in a way that's rational. Olam al yashlik adam as dato acharav. A person should never throw his mind behind him. Ki ha'einayim heim lifnim lo lachor. Okay, because God put the eyes in the front, not the back. Ukvar higati as lechem as libi b'dvarai. Yeah. Okay. So that's the Rambam's derech for approaching these things. Okay. So in our Gemara, oh, and by the way, you also have this. I'm just going to read this because I don't know who's going to listen to this. And there's this great. I'm not going to read through the whole thing. This great set of letters that were published posthumously by from Rav Hirsch, in a pamphlet published in Light Magazine. Okay, I have this as a PDF if anyone wants it, called "Trusting the Torah Sages," and Rav Hirsch says a bunch of things that are very important. But I just want to read this one section here called Sages of Torah, Not Masters of Science. In my opinion, the first principle that every student of Chazal's statements must keep before his eyes is the following. Chazal were the sages of God's law, the receivers, transmitters, and teachers of his Toros, his mitzvos, and his interpersonal laws. They did not especially master the natural sciences, geometry, astronomy, or medicine, except insofar as they needed them for knowing, observing, and fulfilling the Torah. We do not find that this knowledge was transmitted to them from Sinai. Nowadays, too, it is enough for the non-specialist to know about any of these areas of knowledge, whatever contemporary experts teach that is generally accepted as true. This applies to the lawyer vis-a-vis all other areas, to the mathematician and the astronomer regarding the natural sciences, and to the expert on flora regarding all other areas. We expect none of them to seek out the truth and satisfy his inclinations in any field other than his own specialty. Moreover, even in the area where one is expert, it is neither possible for him nor expected of him to know everything through personal investigation and experience. In other words, not everyone could be a Rabag. Most of his knowledge rests upon the investigation of others. If they have erred, it is not his fault. It is sufficient and praiseworthy if his knowledge encompasses all that is accepted as true at his time and place and generation. The greatness of his wisdom is in no way belittled if in a later generation it is discovered that some of the things he maintained or accepted on the authority of others are unreliable. The same is true for Chazal in these areas. The greatest of them knew all the wisdom and science of all the great non-Jewish scholars whose wisdom and teachings became famous in their generations. Okay, and you got to read the whole thing because there's a lot of good stuff there. Okay, so back to our Gemara. So what approach are we going to take? So we have approaches. We have three approaches. Okay, approach number one is Chazal meant these things literally. Okay, and we now know they were mistaken. Okay, and we know this because we know that these are scientific phenomena and they don't actually like portend these things. Okay, you could also say Chazal meant these things and they are true, okay? But I don't think anyone in this particular shiur holds that, so we're going to exit out, okay? You could also say, by the way, another approach, which I'm also not going to go into tonight, but I'll show you where to find it, is Chazal were never talking about eclipses, okay? They were talking about something else, and that statement is true, okay? Now, there is a great article, which I have read most of, on Hakira. Okay, so if you go to Hakira, I'll just show you how to get to Hakira. For those who don't know, Hakira is like the best free English articles written by great Chachamim on a bunch of topics. So Hakira.org, HAKIRAH.org, and you can view all the articles except for the ones in the present, in the most recent edition. And this article is called in volume 23, The Great American Eclipse of 2017, Halakhic and Philosophical Aspects. He goes through, the author, this is by Jeremy Brown, who's Erica Brown's husband, I believe. He goes through our Gemara, okay, and he goes through a bunch of different possibilities. Okay, so for example, the Maharal explains that, where is it here? Oh, I went too far. The Maharal, where is it? Yeah, the Maharal explains that, Maharal raises this question that it's mechanical and predictable. So he basically says this whole elaborate thing about like if God had designed the universe differently, then what would it have looked like? And he has this whole complicated thing that works out. The Rav Yonasan Eibeshitz holds that it's not talking about eclipses, it's talking about sunspots, okay, which are something that he held was not predictable. The problem, though, is you can't see those with the naked eye, and Chazal didn't know about them. Another one was answer is given by Rav David Pardo maybe, who says that there are certain eclipses that can't be predicted. And this is talking about those, but we know that that's not true. And Lubavitcher Rebbe gives a thing about when the eclipse is, it's talking about whether the eclipse is visible or not. So you can read this article if you're interested in more stuff on that, okay? But, so I don't reject, I reject this approach, okay? But then we could say, another approach we could take is that Chazal didn't intend this to be taken literally. Rather, they were trying to teach us some idea, or Chazal didn't intend this to be taken literally, Rather, they were speaking based on the times and circumstances, i.e., not even a universal idea. Okay, meaning like, the Ran at the end of one of his drushos was giving this drasha in shul during the time of the Black Death, and he connects his idea to the Black Death. Now, would the Ran have said the same ideas if there was not a plague going on? I don't know. Like, if so, then that's what I mean in number 4. If not, then that's what I mean in number 5. Okay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna try to take this in that way. Now, I actually have to stop giving shiur soon, so I'm just gonna give a brief overview here. Okay. I was inclined towards an approach like Devora, okay, or like Lauren, that these signs don't mean that something is going to happen. Rather, these are natural phenomena that we know are natural, but we are attaching a certain significance to them that should prompt certain behavior. Now, Lauren really gave the best example of this, which is the famous Ramban on the rainbow. Okay, which if you haven't read that, then you should. In fact, we're going to do it now because it's so important. Bon on the Rainbow is in 9. Rashis 9, I think. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to read the yeah. So he says, so basically the Ramban says, if you just read the Psukim, it would seem like God created the rainbow after the flood. But then he says, but we are forced against our will to believe the words of the Greeks, meaning the scientists, that from the moisture, from the light of the sun in the moist air, then there will naturally be a rainbow. Because you could take like a vessel of water and it'll make like a prism, so you could see a rainbow. Because then he goes and he reinterprets the psukim to be in line with that. So in other words, people used to think that when there's a rainbow in the sky, then maybe it means that God wants to destroy the world and he's holding it back. But now we know that rainbows are natural. They're going to happen no matter what. Like I tell my students who always, ask, does rain, when you see a rainbow, does that mean that God wants to destroy the world? So I tell them that, Hawaii, where I was born, is called the Rainbow State because there are literally rainbows every day, many rainbows every day. And if you go to Yemen, where there are a bunch of there's civil war and terrorists, or you go to Afghanistan where there's like Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, guess what? There are no rainbows. Okay, so does that mean that God wants to destroy all the Hawaiians and he doesn't want to destroy all the warring nations? No, it just means that there's not enough moisture in the air there, But the rainbow, when we see it, can serve as a remembrance of the ideas of the bris. Okay, so I want to take that approach, but I actually didn't get it from the rainbow. I got it from what I think would be, the best candidate if we were to make a bracha on the eclipse would be the bracha of Osamasa Breshis. Okay, that's what we make for Birkas Hachama also, because that's the bracha we make on like astounding natural phenomena. Okay, but I think there's a second candidate for what bracha you might make on eclipses. Anyone want to venture a guess? If not Osamasa Breshis?
So like Mariv, like a Mavdil Ben or
okay, yeah, someone said that. Yeah, someone said that because you're talking about light and darkness, then something about being Mavdil or Lachoshech. Yeah, I think that's a good candidate. That's not the one I was thinking of. So I was thinking of Kirsh Levana. Okay. And the reason why, let's just read Kirsh Levana. Okay. So it says like this. I'm using the Ashkenazic one. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, Hashem, our God, King of the universe. Asher b'ma'amaro barashchakim, who created the heavens with his word. Uvuruach piv kol tzava'am, and all of their array with the breath of his mouth. Chok uzman nasan lahem shalishanus tafkidam. He granted them a fixed law and schedule so that they should not alter their tasks. Sasi musmeikim lasos raton konam. They are rejoice and are glad to carry out the will of their creator. Poel emes shpu'ulaso emes. I think this is a correct translation. Each is a true servant whose action is true. V'lalavana amar, and he instructed the moon shetischadish, to renew itself. Ateres tiferes lamuz levaten, as a crown of glory to those who are born from the womb. Shehim asidim lihischadish kamosa, who are destined to be similarly renewed. Ulafire liyotram al shem kavod malchuso, and to glorify their creator for the name of the glory of his kingdom. Baruch atah Hashem mechadish chodashim. Blessed are you, Hashem, who renews the months. Okay, so I think this is a good candidate because it is about the moon, and the eclipse happens because of the moon, okay, going in front between the sun and the earth. But also, what's the real theme of this bracha beyond the moon? What we say the theme is, just like most of the brachas that we make, you make a bracha on lightning, but the theme is Maaseh Breshis. You make a bracha on good news, but the theme of the bracha is God bringing us to this time. So you make the bracha on the moon, but what's like the main theme of the bracha beyond the moon? So I think it's the fixed cycles in nature. Okay, that God makes everything with a fixed schedule that doesn't alter its tasks, and these things are reliable. Okay, Pulas means that it's like a reliable thing. Okay, so that fits the eclipse because this is a manifestation of that reliability. So I looked in the Pirush of the Eitz Yosef, and I'm not going to type this out because we're short on time. I'm just going to read this. Okay, we're not going to read on the whole bracha. So what does it mean? Ula levana amar shatis chayish, that God told the moon to renew itself. So he says, Ratza lamar. This means to say, Gam shenasan lahem choku zman shalishanu, even though God gave them a set schedule and a time to not change. Al titma al shinui halavana b'chol yom v'yom mimei hachodesh b'chesrona u'miloah. Do not be astonished about the gradual daily change of the moon over the course of the month in its waning and waxing. Ki ein zeh shinui. This is not a real change. It's its way, meaning in other words, the moon isn't like deviating from God's will, it's doing God's will when it changes. That's what God said to the Levana at the beginning of its creation, that it should renew itself every month. Okay, so very good. So that's the pivot point of the bracha, the hinge. Okay, that it's talking about how everything is regular, and even the moon renewing itself is regular. Okay, but it's just regular and it changes. Okay, so who cares? So he says, "V'hu siman ateres melucha." This is a sign of the crown of the monarchy. Shetachzor lebeis David achar shechasera, that will return to the house of David after it has been missing. She'al kain omrim. That's why we say David Melech Yisrael chai v'kayan. David, king of Israel, lives forever. Ukumo she'echtov lekamen v'hirusha. Okay, he's going to explain that later. V'gam hu siman tiferes lamus evatin. It's also a sign of splendor for those born of the womb. Perush Latiferes Yisrael, Shenikru Ha'amusin Mine Baten. It's a glory for Israel, who is called those who are born from the womb. Shehim Monim L'chodshei Halavana. They're the ones who count the lunar months. She'af Haim Asidim Lihischadish Kamosa. They too will be renewed like the moon. Migalusam, from their exile. Ketinuk Hanola Mine Baten, like a newborn baby. She is kadushu malchusam v'tifartam ukedushasam. She is kadshu b'kedushaso yisala. That their malchus and their splendor and their holiness will be revealed when they're sanctified through God's sanctity. V'kablu ora, and they will receive its light. V'simcha ma'oros Elokeinu Yisala, and the joy of the light of our God. And then the light will be cast upon our souls. That Israel will one day be renewed and sanctified, just like the moon is renewed and sanctified. Okay, so here you have a phenomenon that's like the rainbow, that the moon just does its thing every month. However, for us, we should look at the moon and say that this is a sign that just even so, you can look at the moon and think that, oh no, the moon is going away. Okay. And if you view that as an isolated event, you would say it's a loss. But we know that it is a cycle and a pattern, and it's obeying God's will. Okay. So too, when you see something horrible in the Jewish people, like the destruction of the first base of Mikdash and the galus and the loss of our malchus, or you see the Holocaust and millions of Jews get killed, it's easy to look at that and see that as a chance occurrence or as something that shouldn't happen, okay? But really, we should look at it as God's will, and just as it's God's will that the moon be diminished and renewed, so too it's God's will that our malchus be taken away and our people be diminished, and that will be renewed as well. So it's a sign to associate to that idea, okay? Any questions on that before we get back to our Gemara? Okay, so now last point for tonight, because I don't we don't have time to go through every part of the Gemara. What approach do you think we can say for this idea of, let's just take the first part of the Gemara here. That said, where is the Gemara? That when the sun is eclipsed, it's a bad time for the whole world. And then when during the time the luminaries are eclipsed, it's a bad time for the Jewish people, for they are experienced in their beatings. Okay. And by the way, there's a Rashi on this. Did I copy the Rashi down here? Yeah, there's a Rashi that tries to reconcile those two statements. He says, they are experienced in their beatings. All types of calamities that befall the world. Lidog. The Jews should be worried. Velomar, and say, Lo ba simenze ela bishvileno, that this sign only came because of us. Yoser mishar umas, more so than the other nations. Because we are accustomed to be punished more than the other nations. Okay, so you could read this, by the way, into the approach that Devorah is saying and that I'm saying now, which is that you could say Rashi is acknowledging it's not that this calamity came because of our sins. It's that when this comes, we should get into the habit of saying that this is because of our sins. So it has to do tshuva. Okay, but what can we say specifically about like this idea that it's like God taking away, it's like the king taking away the light that for the feast that he gave the people, or it's like a schoolmaster coming to strike people with the straps, and we should be worried. Yeah, Ella?
Maybe for the first one about the feast, it's like in the world we're all going about our business or whatever and feasting, and then like this sudden darkness is kind of a reminder that like everything that we're enjoying is not necessarily for granted or whatever, and just like causing us to reflect on that and think.
Okay.
And it feels negative.
Yeah, and it definitely feels like in a negative way. Yeah. Okay, good. I like that approach. I'll elaborate on a second, but who else wanted to say? I saw hands up. Unless you're going to say the same thing. Yeah, Fega?
So this is for the second part, that it's a bad sign for the Jewish people.
Yeah.
Because if the Goyim kind of see it as a bad time, then they might turn to the scapegoats.
Okay, so it might actually be a bad thing for the Jews if the non-Jews see it. That's a good point. That's a good literal warning. Yeah. Okay, I was thinking similar to Ayala. Okay, that the mashal of the king with the lamp and the feast is he's really providing them not only with enjoyment, like benefit, but also a light so that they can enjoy it by. But if they take that for granted and they do something to upset the king, he can just plunge them into darkness and remind them where all this came from, So I think that this is warning us in Galus to not be too comfortable and take for granted all of the enjoyments that we are accustomed to, and to realize it can be taken away in an instant. Those of us who are traveling to see the eclipse will experience this profound moment of darker, and then the world being like plunged into darkness like night. Okay. And I think that does happen in Jewish history. Okay. And the example that comes to my mind, I don't know why. And I actually meant to like read this beforehand, but I forgot to do the research. The Great Synagogue in Berlin. Johnny told me about this. The old synagogue in Berlin, which was restored in 1928. Oh, sorry. This is not the article I was at. The article I was reading this before was longer. Maybe it was in the Kristallnacht article. Wait, hold on. Okay, I don't know what article I was reading then. Okay, there was an article that said, New Synagogue, that's what it is. The New Synagogue, not the old one. Okay. Yeah, that it says, according to the Jewish Telegraph Service of October 1934, the Sabbath Eve liturgy was performed in front of a packed house of 3,000 in the synagogue. This is clearly a mistake in Wikipedia because it says on October 25th, 1936. Okay, that's a contradiction. It was met with an enthusiastic ovation. Okay, et cetera, et cetera. The collaboration was such a success that Wiener collaborated with Jacob Weinberg again on the September 5th, 1938, when he conducted the prize-winning opera, The Pioneers of Palestine. the first opera on Hebrew Israeli themes. It was performed on the 5th of September, 1938, at another Berlin synagogue as part of the Kulturbund. The Kulturbund was a program that permitted performances of Jewish works in Germany as the Nazi regime escalated. The Nazis did not allow Jewish blah, blah, blah. Okay. But then the new synagogue survived Kristallnacht, the pogrom of November 1938. Okay. So the reason why I want to bring this up is September 1938, you're performing Jewish operas in Nazi Germany, or in Germany becoming Nazis. And then Kristallnacht is in 1938, and we all know what happened after that. Okay. So I think this is a good example of, like, you know, you could see things, you know, it's a very good muscle for the eclipse. Okay. Because as we get closer in the eclipse, it'll get darker and darker and darker, and then suddenly darkness, like total night darkness, you know? So same thing in the world, that there are signs that things are going bad for the Jews, but it could turn very bad very quickly, you know? And that should prompt us to do tshuva, you know? It's nichush if you make decisions about like everyday decisions about, you know, whether to invest in a stock or not. And then if you see a black cat, you choose not to, that's actually asur midoraisa. But if you use something as a vehicle for tshuva, that's totally acceptable. And you can listen to my shiur, the metaphysical implications of stubbing your toe, if you want to know the derech in that. So I think that's the approach of this Gemara. I have not gone through and learned, like, you know, through all of these particular things. And apparently, according to Rashi, he doesn't know either for some of these things. But I think that's the derech. And so those of us who see the eclipse, I mean, it's going to be a joyous thing, you know, because it's going to be cool. And we should appreciate Chachmas Hashem. And I think that should be the overriding feeling. But at the same time, take this mushal in mind and realize that, like, yes, you know, Chazal took this as a bad sign, which, by the way, is why some people say that they did not set up a bracha on this, because they viewed this as a bad thing. Although you can make the argument that there are other bad things that they did have brachas on. Like if there's an earthquake, you also say bracha on that, you know. But, you know, you should take this in mind and view this, take in the experience of the switch to pitch blackness, and remember that this can happen to the Jews, you know. But then beyond that, enjoy the Chachmas Hashem. And yeah, if you think of anything else about the eclipse, I want to write this up as an article by Sunday so that other people can read it. But if you think of anything else or discover anything else or have any other ideas on the Gemara, let me know. But I'm glad that this shiur, this very impromptu shiur, I hope it turned out to be good. I definitely gained from going through this, because it's the first time I've like put it together like so completely. Okay, any other questions?
It was very good.
Okay.
It makes me definitely more excited to see the eclipse now.
Okay, good.
I didn't know the first Gemara that you showed, so
okay, nice.
It also motivates me. But I was wondering if you think it applies to all science, if you could generalize that Gemara to all sciences.
Yeah.
Or
so I definitely think that there are aspects that apply to all sciences, you know, certainly the Chachmas Hashem. But I think there is a unique thing about the universe, you know. Part of it has to do with like the size and the smallness of our place in the universe, which we can appreciate now even more. Part of it has to do with the precision and regularity, you know, like even in modern sciences. In physics you can get that, but let's say like in biology, you know, you can get like reliable cause and effect, but like you don't have like, I mean, you're the you know, person who knows biology, but like what the ancients appreciated about astronomy was like machinery, like you know, this perfectly oiled machine moving in exactly predictable patterns that are, you know, far removed from us, you know. So like there's something about that generates a specific kind of awe, especially now that we know that we are on one of these heavenly bodies as well, you know. So I don't know if that's the same. And then similarly, you know, you don't have the whole avodah zarah thing, which obviously is not as big now as it is then. You could argue that there's more avodah zarah in modern way people relate to like you know, biology than you know, than astronomy. But I think those are some differences.
You know, biology is way more complicated. Yeah, it's really it's not as simple as someone who today spent like whatever a lot of time thinking about something. So
right.
It's very complicated.
I also think even in physics, even though physics is more exact, then you can't observe the regularity, you know. But like with the astronomy, you can observe it. Like you could see the patterns, you know, like Like, I mean, the most recent experience I had, which is not so recent anymore, you know, I always used to go to Hawaii in the summer, you know, and we would watch the sunset every sunset. And then when I went back for my grandma for Popo's funeral, it was in February, and I was like, the sun is setting in a completely different place in the ocean, you know, and like it made me realize, like, oh, yeah, because like the Earth is in a different blah blah blah, and and so like I didn't know enough science to fill in the blah blah blah, but it made me aware of like careening through space, you know, and I don't think you could get that in the same way with physics. Okay, have a good night, everyone, and a good Shabbos and good eclipse viewing.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so
You
much.
too.
Thank you. Thank you.